Nat and Rita Evans. Perhaps you know Brother Nat Evans. His father, Brother Nat, has been a gospel preacher for over 50 years. Matter of fact, Brother Nat does, and he looks like him to me, Brother Guy in Woods. He does an imitation of Brother Guy in Woods, and if you can get around him, get him to do that sometime. If you remember Brother Woods, or maybe watch him online, and then get Brother Nat to do that. But he also is a great preacher in his own right. Brother Evans' wife, Megan, is here. She is from Henderson, Tennessee. They have been married since the year 2001, and they have 3 Christian daughters, Emma, Mary Kate, and Lily. Adam himself is a graduate, 2003 graduate of Freed-Hardeman University. He has a degree in accounting. He's also been a gospel preacher for 15 years. He also came to our World Missions program, and he graduated from it in 2013. He's traveled on short-term evangelistic trips to India, to Tanzania, Nicaragua, and Panama. Then he and his family spent over 3 years in Iringa, Tanzania. He came to the missions program and then went into Iringa in order to plant the seed. Adam has translated, printed, and circulated 5 different books in Swahili throughout East Africa. He continues to do short-term follow-up and translation work in Tanzania. You know the Apostle Paul, when he would go into places, and he'd been to many places, but yet also they would go back. He would send various ones back into those areas. Well, that's a very profitable work. He currently serves as a full-time preacher for the Valdosta Church of Christ in Tuscumbia, Alabama. I think if you look up the word organized in the dictionary, you would see Brother Adam's photo. He was very well organized while he was in school. Maybe that gets into that accounting principle. Maybe that's why he likes accounting. And if you look up the word unorganized, you'd probably see my photo. But he's organized, and so I appreciate that. And because he is organized, he usually gets a lot done. And so I appreciate that in him. He's a good friend, a good brother in Christ, and I look forward to hearing his presentation at this hour.
Good morning. It's a blessing to be able to be here, to have this opportunity. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be able to tell you a little bit about what took place overseas and the work that we were involved in Tanzania. Is there a magic button for the remote control? There we go. All right. You may be wondering, again, who I am. Here's a picture of my family. This was taken as we were overseas. We're the Evans family, and we worked in Tanzania, East Africa. You may be wondering where exactly that is. And here is a picture of the continent of Africa, and you can see highlighted there is Tanzania. We lived and worked in Iringa, Tanzania, as was stated, for over 3 years. And some of the places you may be familiar with there in Tanzania is the Chamala Mission in southwest Tanzania, or possibly the Andrew Conley School of Preaching, which is in the north. And you can see those pictured there. And then also is pinpointed Morogoro, Tanzania. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we move through the presentation. But we work there presently and started to work there at the end of my tenure as we were overseas. And so give you a little bit of background about when and where we were working. We started looking for an overseeing congregation to work with us in 2012, February 2012. And we acquired that congregation. It was the West End Church of Christ outside St. Louis, Missouri. And a wonderful congregation. And we worked with them through the entirety all the way up until last month. And we recently have transferred now. And so the East Hill Church of Christ in Pulaski, Tennessee now oversees my work. And so we're very, very thankful for that congregation. And so we acquired that congregation and then came here to Memphis to go through the World Mission Program and the preparation program that they have here. And then we moved overseas August 2013. This gives you a little bit of an idea of how long we were over there. And then continuing to make follow-up trips. I was planning on being in Tanzania right before this seminar, but had to delay it because we've taken on a couple of foster children and was unable to go overseas at this time. Why evangelize? Well, there is an opportunity. The Bible teaches us that the harvest truly is plenteous. And we see also from the text there that there is a problem, and that is that the laborers are few. And so there is a solution. The first thing that we can do is we can pray for more laborers to be sent forth. And then not only must we pray, but we must be willing to take action to do something about that and to be involved in that solution. Just as we read in Isaiah the prophet, Isaiah was one that was willing to go. Though he realized his inadequacies, he realized that certainly he had some shortcomings, but he realized that he was redeemed, that he was an individual that was a child of God and was willing to go. And so he said, "Here am I, send me." In Acts chapter 14 and verse 26, we find Paul and Barnabas. They returned back from whence they were sent to go and to report upon the work that they were sent to do. And as they did, they gathered the body together, the church, and they rehearsed all the things that had taken place, all the work that had been done, and how God had opened the door unto them, unto the Gentiles. So it is appropriate, it is biblical, it is scriptural for us then to talk about work that has been done overseas. You may be wondering, what were we doing overseas? Well, this gives you a little bit of an idea. We were involved in church planting and in seminars, translation work, and radio, door-to-door, and Bible studies. We'll talk about each one of those. In 2013, we had a new church plant. When we talk about the city of Iringa, now it is a city set on a hill, and you can see it from far away with the lights. It's lit up, and so it is up a little bit. The original congregation was planted over 20 years ago, is down below the city of Iringa. It's called Ipogolo. And so when you go to Iringa, you have to go up the mountain to go to Iringa. But the new church plant was planted even up higher. It's in a suburb of Iringa called Untitled, and that's where it was planted. And so you have to go a little higher up the mountain to get there. And so here's an image of the new congregational church plant that was there in August of 13. And what happened is some of those members that were a part of that original congregation, it was taking them a long time to travel. In a personal car, it takes at least 20 minutes. If you're going to go by dollar in public transportation, it's going to take you a while to be able to get down to the other congregation. And so they decided, a few of the members lived up in Umtwivilla, and they decided that they were going to start worshiping together there and to try to work in that area. And that was right about the time that we moved in. I think that took place like a month or two before we moved over. And so you can see a picture of the congregation. It was as it was started in August of 2013. And here is a picture in February 14, where the congregation purchased a new piece of land. They were there on temporary land. One of the members allowed them to worship for a short period of time, but he needed to sell the land. And so the congregation looked to find another piece of land so that they could have it for many years. And so they took the bones of the old building and they moved it in 2014. And so here is the house of worship. It's the place where we worship for the whole time that we were there. And when we moved into Iringa, that became our home congregation. We were members of that congregation. And so if there were men's business meetings, I was one of the men in that meeting. And so here is another image of the congregation. It gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the teaching that took place there. And here's a picture of 2015 and the congregation in 2015 and in 2016 as we were there. Now, Christopher Mongotti, he was the preacher there. And Christopher kind of became the preacher by default. Though he was a new Christian, had not been a Christian for very long, he came out of Pentecostalism. And actually, he was a preacher in the Pentecostal denomination for some time. He was converted and still a new Christian. And because they started the congregation over there where he lived, and he was one of the new members, because he was the oldest, number one. Number two, he was a man. Then by default, he became the preacher. And and he had some experience as well, even though he's still a relatively new convert. And so he is the preacher there at that congregation. We work very closely beside Christopher. And here's a picture of his family. And you'll notice in this image one of the audio-visual kits. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. But he received one, and here's an image of his family. At the very end of our tenure when we were there, we arranged for him to go to the Andrew Conley School of Preaching. Because he needed that foundation. We worked very closely with him while we were there, and he had the desire, and it was a great blessing for him to have the opportunity. So we arranged and made the payment for him to be able to go, and we supported his family so that he could go to the school, and now he has graduated from there. And while we were there, his wife was not a Christian, and matter of fact, she was rather aggressive. We would go door knocking, and not long after that, his wife would arrive and say, don't listen to what he was saying, because she was still a member of the denomination. And they started making her a leader in that denomination, and so she was going around, and it just caused all kinds of trouble. And so we celebrated the day, and still to this day, I'm so thankful that the word was planted within her, and over time it blossomed, and God brought the increase. And now she's a New Testament Christian. She's faithful. She's by her husband's side, who is working there in Mtwivila. And so how is Mtwivila today? Well, I will show you some of the images of what is taking place today. And certainly we know, 3 John 4, we have no greater joy than to hear that they are faithful, that they are continuing in truth. And we know that they are. Now, some of these images that I'm putting up here now were taken from Christopher's Facebook, and he took them, so they're taken from his cell phone, but this tells you some of the things that have been taking place. Here's January of 2019. The congregation is still continuing very well. One of the individuals that was converted February 2014 is Abinel. And Abinel is still faithful. Matter of fact, he is one of the leaders of the congregation. And you can see him pictured here as he is leading in that congregation. And so we're so thankful for that, because they need those male leaders to lead in those congregations. Here's a picture of Shadrach as he's teaching the children. Now, when we arrived in Iringa, they were not teaching the children. And that Mtwivila congregation, they didn't have any time to teach them. They really didn't see an importance of teaching the women or the children. And so we tried to work on that, and it took us a while. It took us about a year to work with them and to show them the importance and to model that before them. And we were able to do that. And so I am proud to say that this had nothing to do with us per se. They're doing it now. They saw that it was effective, and they've taken that principle and they've implemented this. And so they are continuing to do that. We're so thankful for that. Here is a baptism that took place in April of 19. And then here's an image of Christopher preaching in June. And then another baptism in June of 2019. Now, I didn't have anything to do with this. This is work of Christopher. So I'm just showing you what is happening. We worked with that congregation. We worked to make sure that Christopher received the training and modeled that and mentored Christopher. And he's continuing on. And so this is not by my campaign work. This is his work. I'm just showing you what he's been involved in. Now, he is doing a Bible correspondence course, and when they complete it, they get a certificate. And so I had to contact him yesterday and say, Christopher, what is this about? Because I didn't know. He's the one that did this. And so this is great, and we're very thankful for that. He saw the need, he's implemented it, and here are those individuals that were receiving those certificates. And so we're very thankful for that, and because of that, you're seeing the growth. In September, there's another baptism, and we're very, very thankful for that. Now, as a part of our teaching, we used seminars, such as the one we're in right now. And not always was that for those that were Christians. Sometimes it was for non-Christians. The first one we had in September of 13 was for non-Christians. And it was on the real Jesus, teaching people who Jesus was. And we had a Muslim that attended the entire seminar several nights. And boy, he had a lot of questions. But it was a great opportunity to lay that foundation, to plant that seed. And so we were able to answer a lot of his questions. We had another seminar in November of 2013, and this was on Bible covenants And so we were very thankful for that to show the difference between the old and new. And that was designed really not only for the non-Christians that we invited, but for the members of the church who were still new converts, to try to strengthen them and ground them in the faith. In June of 14, we had a Bible survey seminar. And then there was a youth seminar in 14, and you can see the images there. And then we had an open-air gospel meeting in October of 14. Now, I will say that was not our most effective way of spreading the gospel there. The seminars were better attended. We had more people that were there. When we had the open-air gospel meeting, we didn't have very many people. Just a few. However, we were still able to reach the Muslims sitting in their homes. Those speakers were huge, and you could hear it from miles away. So we just preached and preached and preached. And everybody that was still going about their business and in their shambas, and they were working over there in their stores and their dukas and in their fields, we were still able to preach to them. And thus we did. So we had seminars in 2015. One of them was on the head covering. And the reason is because there was some false doctrine that had been brought in previously, and we had to address the teaching. And so January of 15, we brought in a guest speaker from Arusha to teach on that. And then in May, we had a conflict resolution seminar. Because of some issues that were there and trying to deal with conflicts, this is always beneficial. I think that this is a good seminar for the United States, is to learn how to deal with conflict. Matthew chapter 18 and when to employ that, and when to employ Galatians chapter 6, 1 and 2, and how to utilize all of these different passages. And there are times in which we must remove or withdraw fellowship, and there are times in which we extend that fellowship. And so we had a very good seminar. And I will say this regarding conflict. For an American, money and wealth, not relationships, form the foundation of personal security. And so as long as we have money, we feel secure. But overseas, sometimes when you have the lack of that money, then relationships are the primary thing that you're going to keep. And so when it comes to trying to deal with people, to reprove or rebuke, or especially deal with someone that's teaching false doctrine, often they will choose relationship over the truth. Not always, but often. Because that's how they form that security, and they don't want to alienate themselves from someone that could be a benefit to them, that have that relationship, especially not someone of the same tribe. And so to an individualist, Christ admonishes us in Matthew 6 and verse 24 that we got to love God more than we love money. We are from that type of culture, from that society. We are individualists. We think that we are to have individual property. It's ours. It belongs to us. And we have individual rights. We're from that type of culture and that type of society. So God tells us, listen, you love me more than you love money. But when you go overseas, often you go into a collectivist society or culture. And to them, he tells them in Matthew chapter 10, verse 37, that we've got to love God more than we love our family members. More than we love those relationships, we have to love God more. And if we don't, we're not worthy of Him. And so sometimes we get that confused. We don't understand that. We cause ourselves more harm than good when we go overseas. And so no matter which place you're in, you can still find a way to make an idol of a thing, whether it's relationships or whether it's money. And so we have to deal with those in both places. And so sometimes amongst our best efforts, we still unintentionally do things that can hinder the advancement of the gospel. We don't want to do that, and so we need to try our best not to. And so we had a Bible correspondence course seminar in June of 15. We had a lot of people taking the Bible correspondence course, and so we invited them all in. And you can see there were several that were attending. They had questions, and so we had the answers from the Bible. We were going to provide them to the best of our ability, and did. And so it was very well attended. We even had some Muslims that attended that seminar as well that were going through the correspondence course. And so we were thankful for that. In September of 15, we had a biblical leadership and church organization seminar. This is so important. The reason is because there was problems understanding how church leadership is to function, especially regarding the organization of the church. And I will say this, overseas sometimes in works, they think that the mission compound is the headquarters, and that they will go to the mission compound to solve all their problems instead of trying to deal with it on a local level, on a congregational level, in which local leaders are to rise up and address the problems that are there. They want to try to push that off on somebody else, and that is a problem. It's not scriptural. They have to rise up and deal with those issues. They can bring a teacher to come in and try to counsel them, but ultimately they are the ones that have to make the decision. The mission compound that's far away cannot try to make those decisions for the local congregation. That's a breach of local autonomy, and so we had to deal with that. Another thing we had to deal with is the idea of a regional evangelist. Now, what I mean by that is that they get the idea that if I'm a regional evangelist, then I, as an evangelist, have authority over several congregations. And I can go in and I can make decisions for those congregations, even trying to utilize the treasury of another congregation. And we saw that happen. And so that was something else we had to deal with and try to address. Another thing that we had to deal with and address is the fact that an older congregation might think, well, we're the father congregation, and because we've helped plant another congregation, we have the authority over that congregation. So if you're the oldest congregation, then you have authority over all these other smaller, lower congregations, and you can tell them what to do, and you can tell them how to operate. Oh, that's a problem again. That's not scriptural, that's not biblical. And so we had to try to deal with that in the seminars and in teaching. Now, in June 2016, we had additional seminars. That's a little mamba there I'm holding. We had to kill. He got in the house. And so I'll just throw that picture up there just for curiosity's sake. We had a WBS seminar in January of 16. That was arranged by the congregation down below at Ipagolo, by the preacher that is there, David. And they were real excited initially, but then they were a little bit disappointed because they thought they were going to be receiving material in their language in Swahili, and they were going to be able to utilize it. But what happened is they came in and they said, well, we have these materials in English, which the people out there in the pews couldn't read. And he said, we got this material in English, and we want you to go into the schools, and we want you to enlist people to sign up for this course that you can't even read. Well, the brethren were not going to do that and didn't do it. And they were a little bit disappointed. And so that was somewhat of a failure on that side. Thankfully, we're working to try to put materials into their language so that they can use. But for the local people, they said, well, we're not going to give something to somebody or sign somebody up to take something that we ourselves cannot read. And so that makes sense. And that's what happened in that seminar. We had a parenting seminar. Now, at the beginning of 16, we sat down with the men of Umtwivilla. And we said, okay, we're going to make a plan. This is what we can do. We can have great potential as a congregation, as a group of men. We can sit down and look at the entire year. Now, that normally is not necessarily happening. They may look forward to maybe one seminar here or there, possibly, but some congregations don't do it. Some congregations will just say, well, we're going to leave that to the mission. We'll go to the missions seminars. And they will only allow the mission compound to do that. And what I wanted to show them is that in the local congregation, the local men can sit down and they can make a plan. They can set aside particular teachings. They can bring a teacher from outside that they choose, and they can function themselves, and they can grow. And I wanted them to see this. And so we set that model out, and we had a lot of seminars in 16. We had a parenting seminar with Ellie Martin, came down from Arusha to teach that in February. We had a youth seminar. Frankie came over from Chamala Mission to hold our youth seminar, and it was well attended. We had a marriage seminar in July of 16, and we had Brother Diego from Dar es Salaam, who was previously a Muslim, who's converted to Christianity. We had him come and to teach on that. He did a great job because, he dealt with polygamy. He dealt with all of those things because he understood, and he was able to get up there and quote the Quran and then talk about the Bible. And so it was very, very beneficial. And so you can see some of the studies that we had. We had a preacher seminar in August of 16. Now, we had preachers come from all over the country. And while we were there, we loaded them down with materials. We loaded them down with books because we have been translating materials to put into Swahili. And so we had that opportunity while we had them all together so we could load them down. They could go back to their congregations and they could utilize them. Now, we did go door to door. In Tanzania in general, you can go to a door and you're going to get that first study, and it could last a while. They may sit there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on their time. And you may be able to have that study, but you may go back to that same door and you may never see them again. You may never catch another study with them. And sometimes it's just out of hospitality. And so we did have some good studies. We went to a lot of doors, handed a lot of material. But that wasn't our most effective way. However, in this particular village, which is Mangalali, we did come across one gentleman, and we studied with him. When we told him we were willing to come and study the Bible with him, he said, "Now, how much is it going to cost me?" We said, "We're going to do it for free." He couldn't believe it. You know, the denominations want to charge for that kind of thing. And he couldn't believe it. He was ready to pay good money to study the Bible. And we were like, "Oh, this is great. We're ready to come." I mean, he was ready to do it before he knew that it was going to be free. And we studied with him a significant amount of time. And as we will say, we planted the seed. Lord willing, there will be others to come and water, and God will bring the increase. He learned the truth, but he couldn't let go of the relationships. And so in time, who knows, maybe he will be able to do so. In 2014, we traveled to several different villages. We made a plan, and maybe this will work for you. This is what we did. We had Mangalali Mondays, and on every Monday, we traveled to Mangalali. And here's a map, shows you where we were living and the places I've been describing on a map. And so we traveled from where we lived in Untitled over to Mangalali. Now, if you're looking at the map, and I'm trying to read it from a distance, 17 miles. It'd take us every bit of 50 minutes to an hour to get 17 miles. And that's the travel, but we would go out to that village. We had to study. This is Cosmos. We studied with him significantly and for a long time. Seed was planted. He never obeyed the gospel, but the seed was planted. Who knows what time will bring? We brought him a long way. He had come out of Islam, had gone into some denominations. He thought he was a prophet. He had prophesied 9/11, he told me. And yet we were able to get him out of that and to teach him. And so we also traveled over to Ilula. And let me go back, and you can see the map. Now, Ilula is over here to the far right of your screen, and it would take us about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half to get over to Ilula. And there's a congregation already there. Here's a picture of the preacher there with their building. And we would go over there on occasion, and we started doing that every Thursday and traveling to try to work there. And we did have several people obey the gospel as well. And so here are some of our studies there. Then we worked in Ipagolo, and here is a picture of that. Now, Ipagolo was only 6 miles. It took us about 20 minutes to get down the mountain. And again, that's the congregation that's down the mountain. So we would travel there. And then we also worked in Umtwivilla, which is the village that we lived in as well. And we worked in a suburb, which is Chiesa. It's a suburb of Iringa. And we worked there. And this is one of the studies. The lady in the yellow shirt obeyed the gospel. And so we had a very good study. She's still faithful to today. And then also here's some additional studies that we had. We did a lot of radio work, and it was very beneficial because we got contacts from it. You see, when we would go door to door to door to door, everybody would open the door, and most people would let me study. We could study for that first study, but we wouldn't see them again. We could never get that next study. And so what we tried to do is use the radio. And those people that heard the radio would call us and say, "Hey, we got some questions, or will you come study with us?" Now we've got some good contacts. They want to study, and we're going to have those continual studies. And so we did that. We ended up in Ecovilla. Would have never ended up in this village had we not had the radio. They said, "Will you come out here and study with us?" It took every bit of an hour and a half to drive out there, and it took 25 minutes to hike up the mountain to get to the place where these people lived. And we would go up there, and then we would have to sit and wait for them to come from the Shambas. They were out chasing the monkeys off of their gardens. Shamba's a garden. So they would have to get chase the monkeys off of their gardens, and then they would come in. And so we'd have to sit and wait for them because they were coming from the other side of the mountain and having to hike over the study. But we had great studies. And you can see the pictures here. And it was an entire family, 3 generations of people that we were studying with, and provided them with material and taught them the gospel. Again, seed was planted. Now, again, God will be the one that will bring the increase, but the seed was planted. And that, again, there's no congregation out there. And so we're going into places where the gospel has never gone before. And so we did have conversions. I'll go through these quickly. This is Tukusuma of Kiela. She obeyed the gospel in November, and she has now gone on to her reward. Here's Sarah of Mbeya. She had actually traveled over to live in Iringa. She obeyed the gospel. Now she's gone back to Mbeya. Here's Makwete of Arusha. Now Makwete, he was just traveling through. We were able to study with him. Unfortunately, now he is wayward. And here is Elizabeth in 14 of Ilula. She obeyed the gospel, and she is still faithful. Then there's Abenel. I mentioned him a while ago. In the congregation that we worked in, we studied with him in January of 14 and February, and he obeyed the gospel. And here he obeyed the gospel at night. Now that was interesting to go down to the river at night. I'm a little skeptical to do so over in my area in Alabama, to go down to some of these places in the sloughs at night. But over there, it made me even more skeptical as to what was in the water. But we did it anyways. By faith, we went down into the water for a couple of reasons. The baptizer went down in the water by faith, and the person that was receiving the baptism did too. They went by faith, but a different kind, the faith that comes by hearing the word of God. And so here was Raphael. He was of Kiela. He was passing through. We studied with him. Now, he spoke English, so my whole study was in English. And so I studied with him. He's faithful. And now he lives at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. He's a school teacher. And so a lot of times the people we studied with, they were going all over the country because the people are very transient and they're moving in and out. And so we studied with Esther of Ipogolo in March, and Edison, and then Sameni of Ilula. Now again, that was one we were traveling every bit of an hour and a half to get over there, and he obeyed the gospel. And then there was Samora, and then also his wife, Maria of Kilolo. Now Kilolo is another one of those new congregational church plants, though it is a totally covering congregation because of the teaching that has gone down there. These two individuals did obey the gospel, and we had to travel out there into Kilolo to teach them. And so here is Willie of Iringa. Now, Willie was a leader at the Umtwivila congregation. He got discouraged and now is wayward. And I've visited with him. We're hoping that he will come back because that seed has been planted, and we're hoping to continue to encourage that to grow in him so that he will come back to the faith. And then there was Edna of Kiela, and then Atupai. Atupai obeyed the gospel. He was another one of the men of the congregation we work with, and we worked beside him for several years. And then he went and departed from the faith for a time. But they recently, this year, went and studied with him, and he's been restored. And now, again, he is one of the faithful men of that congregation. So we're very, very excited about that. In 2015, we had Happy of Umtwivila, and then also Joyce. Now, Joyce and her sister Gloria are faithful members of the Umtwivila congregation still to this day. And then there is Jennifer and Christina and Adina that obeyed the gospel. And then Zaituni in June. Now, Zaituni was living there in Iringa, but she has now moved back to Mbeya. She is a faithful member of the Church of Christ. We're very, very thankful for that. And then we had Freddie and Baraka that obeyed the gospel. Two that I'm thankful did obey the gospel as well, close to my heart. My daughters, two of them, Lily and Mary Kate, obeyed the gospel while we were there. And then there was a nephew who joined a family. So all three of these are siblings, Shadrach and his two sisters, and they've obeyed the gospel, and we're thankful for that. And then there was Christopher's wife as well. I'll mention briefly some of the strategies we used. We did buy an audiovisual kit. It was completely solar powered. It ran off of a battery. And so we could go out and we could have projection. So we would go out to some of these places and play a video. And then we were able to have preaching. Now, we used the speakers in our gospel meetings. We didn't have to have the projector. We just used the speakers. And it worked out really, really well because the building at Umtwivila does not have electricity, even to this day. And so you needed a way to be able to have speakers. And so that worked out really well. We also did AV kits. And it was basically just a small Kindle. We got permission from World Video Bible School. And we put the videos that are in Swahili from the brethren there. And we pulled it down and put them on the tablets. And so we're very thankful for that. And this was able to go to one of those new congregations there in Kilolo. And they were able to use that for their Bible class. They could pull it up and then watch the videos. And so it was really, really, really beneficial. Then Deo, who was going to be a gospel preacher one day, I don't know when that will be. He was trying to get a wife first, and then he was going to be a preacher. And so that was his big plan. And so we thought, well, we'll give him one of the kits and to try to encourage him. There was Hezron. He lived in Ilula. Now, he lived 10 miles outside of Ilula. And he would get on his bicycle, and he would ride that thing into town to worship, 10 miles one way, 10 miles back. And it was rugged terrain, mountainous, going up and down. And he would do that every time. And so we gave him one of those kits, and it was very beneficial. Now, he's no longer living there. He's moved to another location where the church doesn't exist. And so he was really excited when he was moving to take this with him. so that he could use it there and then to try to grow the congregation there. And I think it was going to be somewhere in Songwe region where he went down. And so here's some images of his family. Now, his wife was very ornery. She was an unfaithful Christian. And boy, she tried to hinder him. There were times he got locked into his bedroom. She locked him in. She would hide his clothes so he couldn't go to worship, just all kinds of things. And we thought, well, maybe because eventually, that seed was planted in the past, maybe we can use this kid and she'll hear that gospel preaching since she's not coming to the assembly. Maybe he can use this also to bring his wife back. And then there's Abinel, who is one of the main leaders of the Umtruvilla congregation, who also has that kit. And then, again, I mentioned the teaching of the children. We had our first VBS in 2015, and man, we had a lot of kids come. And we were teaching them the prophets. We did so for a reason. We wanted to teach them the major prophets from the Old Testament, and then ultimately the great prophet, Jesus Christ, because we had a lot of Muslim children that were there and attended, and so we wanted to make sure also that they had that teaching. And so we're always looking for an open door. We decided that we wanted to do something in Morogoro. That was a 5-hour drive from us. And we would drive through that city, and it's a growing city. I say that like the mosquitoes are down around Arkansas and Louisiana, they're just everywhere. That's kind of like the motorcycles are in Morogoro. They are everywhere. I just couldn't stand driving over there because I was afraid I was going to hit somebody. They were just everywhere, right, left, front, back. And so it's a growing city. And so we put the gentleman that was my translator while we were in Iringa, Bright Mokaboko, is there with his wife and their children. Now pictured here is their first child, Megan, named after my wife. And then they just had another child. And they named her Lily, after my youngest daughter. And so Bright's a good man, and we have a Bible study center there. It is not a preacher training school. It's just a Bible study center. And it's to give anybody the opportunity to study the Bible. Anybody can come in, sign up, study the Bible. Because we believe that if we can get people into the book, we can bring them to salvation. If they will give their time to study the book, that we can bring them to it. They can be converted. If we could just get them there. And of course, God is going to bring that increase. But we believe we've got to plant that seed, and this was an opportunity to do so. And so overseas, especially in Tanzania, women do not have that opportunity to study. And so a woman can go and study here and learn. And so that will help strengthen also another part of the core of a congregation. So they have that Bible study center there, and it is just outside of Morogoro. And so missionaries must pass the leadership baton to nationals who can more effectively lead their own local congregations, their churches, and movements. And sometimes paternalism keeps us from doing that. And so we did something very different. And that is that the Bible Study Center, Bright owns the land, he owns the building. And he is the director, so I don't oversee him at all. I worked with him. He is solid in the faith. He knows the truth. I was there with him for 3 years. I trust him. And so I know that he will teach the truth and that he will continue. Now, it's in his hands. And so he's going to be accountable to God for that. And he is not accountable to me. And so he is a good friend. And so here is a picture of the inside as he's teaching there. And there's a lot of opportunities that are there for teaching. Now, my current work, you may be wondering what we're doing. And it is a work. Acts 14 and verse 26, they were sent out to do the work, and they came back and reported on the work. And it is work. And for us as New Testament Christians, we need to be people that have a mind to work. We see that in Nehemiah. And that we need to realize that in order to grow the body of Christ and to plant and water, brethren, it takes work. It does. It really does. We just cannot sit back and do nothing. That's not work. And so we've got to be busy about that. When you read in Matthew chapter 13, it says, a sower went forth to sow, and when he sowed. What does that mean? We got to get busy. We have got to sow. If there's no work, we're not going to have a harvest. And so we've got to go forth and sow that seed. We've got to go forth and be about the business that our Savior was about, seeking and saving the lost. And my current work especially is translation in which I am working with that. Now, the guys on the ground that I'm working with, they are doing some teaching in school, radio work, and ESL work. But my primary work is working, and it's project-oriented with the translation and printing of biblical materials in Swahili. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. 2 Timothy 4:13 tells us the Apostle Paul felt like that there was power in the printed page. Even for him, it was beneficial. And he talked about that he wanted his books or his scrolls or his parchments. It was dear to him. It had value. And we need to see the value in the printed page. And so we had translated while we were over there, The Elders Which Are Among You by Bobby Duncan, so that we could try to get elders to rise up in individual congregations so that they stop relying upon the mission and start relying upon the men in those congregations to lead those congregations. We had Ascertaining Bible Authority by Roy C. Deaver for the preacher students. That has been in circulation, a book on the head covering because of the dissension there. Another book that is on fellowship and the withdrawal of fellowship, and that we had printed and cycled. And then also The Church of the Bible by J.C. Choate. We have that in tract form, in Bible Correspondence course form, but we also put it into a book, and it has been a great blessing. I want to tell you about the fruit from this one book. I don't know the fruit of all the others, but I know about this one, so I'm going to tell you about it. A congregation was started in Tukuyu. Now, Tukuyu is almost to Malawi, almost to Zambia. It's pretty far over there to the border. It's barely, as we would say, in Tanzania. But this gentleman that's sitting here, he's pictured on your left, he was a government leader. And one of our brethren, our Tanzanian brethren, took the book and gave it to that man. That man studied it, read it, and he's ready to obey it. He found Bright's number in the front of it. He called Bright and said, "Will you come here and baptize me?" I said, "Well, we need to get down there." So we sent a couple of guys down there, and they went on campaign and studied, and this was the outcome. You have all of these individuals that obeyed the gospel because one gentleman read the material. We wanted to make sure and confirm their understanding before they obeyed the gospel. So they went down and they studied with them to confirm their understanding, and it was confirmed. And so this was the very first worship service in Tukuyu, just because of some material that was in their language, in Swahili, so that they could pick it up, they could read it, they could comprehend it, and they could apply it. And so again, you're sowing that seed. It was just a guide to point them back to the Bible, but it is an effective guide to get them into the Scriptures. And so I am involved in current translation work. We've translated all 16 quarters, Engraving Heavenly Truths, and we've utilized that, but we're going to try something new. We're going to put it into a booklet. And we've done this by permission, and we're going to put it into a booklet, and so that they don't get lost and the rings don't open up and cards go everywhere. It was really hard to utilize the other tool that we had. We have Why I'm a Member of the Church of Christ. I believe this will be the next one we'll have in print and cycled. If you want to check out our table, there's all of these documents that are there that have marks all over them that look really ugly. That's the in process of some of the works. That is, they're not yet in print, but they're getting there. You can see the editing that's taking place. Apologetics Press has some works there, and they have 30 Bible Correspondence courses. We're working through those we've already translated, but we're editing. The Prophets of God and Jesus the Christ. There's a couple of wording issues that we have to contact World Bible School regarding, and then we'll be able to put that into print. And then Ira Rice's 27-lesson Bible Correspondence course. We've got it translated, and we've gone through one edit, but we've got to go through a couple more, and then we'll have that in print. And then God's Girls by Teresa Hampton as well. And then When is an Example Binding by Thomas B. Warren. We've got it translated, but we have to edit it. And then No Such Custom, which has been translated and has to go under further editing. So those are some of the works that we had started. We just need to finish, and then we'll be able to start new works that will be able to be beneficial. We have, also I have taught in the preaching school. This is the Andrew Conley School of Preaching that I've been involved in and teaching. And so we're always wanting to look for open doors. I will tell you of what is taking place there. I'm working with Israel Mhinga, and he was John Strong, my other teammate's translator, and so I worked with Israel for over 3 years on the ground. And so now I'm working with him on a project basis, and he brought in Baraka, and we're working with these two guys. Now, they had a project. They contacted me, and they said, "Look, we want to start a center where we teach English and we teach the Bible, and we want to try this. We want to see how it'll work." And so I sent them the funds. And they found a building, renovated it, had the tables built, chairs built, painted it, brought electricity to it, put everything, and they're teaching. And this is their students. And they did that in a short amount of time. And already they have students. And a part of the deal is if you want to come in and learn English, you got to go through the Bible curriculum. And so they're making some good contacts from this. And of course, in order to evangelize, we have to make contacts, don't we? We have to come in contact with individuals and to form those relationships. They also are teaching during the day in the public schools. And so that is continuing on even till this day. There have been conversions out of that particular work, and these are some of the current ones that have taken place, and they continue to do some radio work. I want to close with two things, really. One is about a gentleman I met in my travels. There was a language training center, was also a campground outside of Iringa, and there was a Brit I met that was there. He was traveling all over Africa. Now, this man was blind, had tubes in his ears, and he was backpacking over Africa. And he had a little, what we would call 2-man tent, maybe a 1-man tent that he had put up. He was sleeping on the ground. And he was traveling through, and we were eating there at this place, and we met him. And I was just astonished. I was amazed that here's a guy that's blind, and he's got tubes in his ears, and he's traveling Africa. And we got our brethren, though, so scared to leave the United States. What? We got the gospel, the power of God into salvation, and we're afraid. And yet this man, he's not even there to share the gospel. He doesn't have the power of God into salvation. Look what he's doing. He's traveling all over. Where is our determination? Where is our courage? We allow fear to overcome us so many times. Let me also say this. We need to use our abilities and talents. Those that are here this morning, those that are watching us online, please use whatever skill, whatever talent you have to the glory of God and for the kingdom. Please use it. There are so many that are all over, and you may not necessarily be able to travel over, but you can use maybe a skill that you have right here, even for foreign mission work. You can utilize that skill and help. And also, you can use it here to bring glory to God, to do great things. We need people that can do computer programming. We need individuals that can use this technology in the United States to make the gospel go, and especially overseas, so that they have those skills and those abilities and those talents. Use that to glorify God. If every member of the body of Christ would do what they could do and to use whatever talent they have to the glory of God, think of all the great things that God can do through us. We've got the power, the dynamite, the gospel in our hands. What will we do with it? Thank you so much for your time.